I'll share my screen too.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Is going to give a couple seconds for people to file in before we officially kick off. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Wednesday Wise webinar. My name is Sydney Konahia with the International Franchise Association. We have a great 60 minutes lined up for you today. Before we get started, I just wanted to touch base on two things. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a recording along with a copy of the slide deck will be emailed out to everyone post-webinar. And if you have any questions for today's speakers, you can feel free to add them to the chat or questions box. Today's topic is marketing trends and hot takes for franchises and is brought to us by Scorpion. Here to provide today's discussion are Gabriella Ferrara, VP of Sales with Scorpion, Julie Green, VP of Marketing with Heights Wellness Retreat, and Maddie Zook, franchisee, franchisor, and supplier at Jack of All Trades. Thank you, ladies, for joining us, and thank you again to Scorpion for sponsoring today's Wednesday Wise webinar. I will now turn things over to our speakers to get us started.
Awesome. So thank you for having us. Happy Wednesday. We're really excited to be here and talk through really the hot takes for franchising. I think in franchise marketing in particular, we know that there's marketing strategies continuously evolving, technology changing, and just the importance of data is more relevant than ever before. So today I have two amazing panelists with various marketing experience within franchising who are willing to share their perspectives on their hot topics. So I know that they had some broad intros, but I think it's always important to better understand, some of their expertise and some of the brands that they're actually supporting. So if Julie, you want to go, and then we can have Maddie go next.
Yes, thank you for having me. So excited. As they said, I'm Julie Green, Vice President of Marketing for Heights Wellness Retreat. Been in the franchising industry. I did the math last night, which was a little scary. This is my 18th year. Spent some time on the home services side in an agency setting, and then missed being in-house with a brand. So I've been at Heights for about 2.5 years now, and we are in the middle of a brand evolution. So happy to be here and share all of that with you all.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm Madeline Zook, CMO at Rolling Suds, and sit on the board for a bunch of other franchises. I'm also a franchisee myself of 5 different brands in the home service industry. We've got about 50 units across Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Soon to be joined by fellow franchisee Gabriella, now that she's a franchisee too in New Jersey. And I also am the founder of a couple supplier companies in the marketing and operations sector. So excited to be here. And as always, I'm going to try and keep it super professional, but I'm going to be as real as possible. So Julie and Gab are ready to rein me in at any time.
Well, awesome. And I think that's the goal, right? We want to make this as interactive as possible. So how we want to make this happen is we're going to share one hot take at a time. And then we'll have Julie and Maddie share their insights with the group. And then to get a sense of the consensus of how you guys are all feeling and to make you feel part of that process, we'd love for you to put in the chat if you agree or disagree, because it helps us just better understand, what's actually going on in your ecosystems and what are things that you guys are thinking about differently. And then from there, there's the Q&A as well. So if there's any questions that you guys want to ask, we'll try to incorporate them in real time to make it easier. But if not, we'll get to them at the end as well. So our first hot take is something that I think is a topic in general that's being talked about not as frequently as it should be, just because of the evolution of everything happening. And so what we're going to talk is local is the new national. And so I'd love for Julie in particular, we were kind of talking about why this is a hot take and what are some of the things that you're doing in your network to really discuss this type of topic within franchising.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times when we as franchisors or even franchisees are having discussions around marketing, it usually tends to lead on the national side with brand funds and what is national, what's happening at national. And I think when franchisees feel empowered locally, your national becomes more relevant because that guest experience feels personal and that journey for them is a personal experience. And so we build a lot of our national campaigns at Heights with that local first mindset. Everything is built to support what is happening at the local level, but our team is consistently building resources and guides and trainings around how even to take the national campaigns and make those locally. But a lot of our marketing centers on community grassroots. We know that people want to do business with small business, with locally owned businesses. And we know that that's what franchises are. And that takes some education on our part as a franchisee or a franchisor. So, for example, we had one franchisee who wanted to partner with a gym. And so we have this program now called Reps in Recovery that was born from a franchisee building those grassroots and local relationships. But we were able to build a toolkit and a guide and a resource for franchisees to be able to take that out to any gym and take reps and recovery into the local community. So again, I think it's empowering your franchisees. I think it's scaling these things to make them easy to replicate, building a process around it so that your franchisees feel like they have the power and the knowledge to be able to do that. We've seen huge success as we've pushed that more than, a local campaign or a national campaign. It's how to take that into the local community.
Awesome. And Maddie, from your perspective, being on the franchisee side as well, what have you seen kind of work best when you're trying to implement those local tactics stemming from the national strategies that have been provided to you?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, as much as, we all would love big brand funds and big budgets to invest in, Super Bowl ads, the reality is that even though franchisees understand they're joining a national brand and they want to see that, national to them is the length of their territory. So what are we doing at a national level really to them means locally. So a lot of the time what I talk to franchisees about is that the biggest thing that a franchisor can do is take care of this, let's say, national SEO. Is it fancy? No. What does that mean? Websites, making sure that the schema markups are correct, you're showing up correctly. And then outside of that, we're looking for the local SEO, which there's companies like Consumer Fusion that handle, the listings or the reputation, and essentially telling the franchisees, look, we are partnering and paying retainers in the brand fund level at national types of scale, so that the only thing you really need to focus on as it pertains to we'll call national marketing is getting more reviews, because we're handling the rest for you and we can show you. So again, understanding that national to the franchisees is either, I mean, Julie, you might agree, but to me, it doesn't feel like there's an in-between. It's either we want branded yachts, but we also want to show up first in our local market every day, every minute. So how do we find accountability, and what does that mean to us? And quite frankly, we all know that the economy is really tough on small businesses right now. So there isn't a lot of wiggle room for us to experiment. So again, where are we deploying funds where there is the largest ROI?
Yeah. And I think it's between the things they control, right? Customer experience, what are things that are actually they're interacting with their local customers. But then to Julie's point as well, it's like, what are some of those local partnerships that you can provide those like nicely packaged promotions for an individual franchisee? Because that's just some low hanging fruit, right? Like they can actually just forge a relationship, build something with that, local community within their territory that they have. So I think, both of those examples are really things that are controllable, but obviously need to be educated to the franchisees. And I think that's definitely a point of when you're thinking about local as the new national, it's about also educating the franchisees, right? So as you said, Maddie, in their mind, like local or national is just their surrounding territory. But if we're not talking the same language of how they're thinking about this, that's kind of potentially where we can all miss the mark. So
and I think, and one last thing on that is to ask the question, right? If you got people complaining about the NAF or what is this fund, where does it go? A lot of times, and Julie, you might agree, some people, they forget that the NAF is not their local spend. They forget what it actually means and what it does. And I would also beg to say, if they're complaining or asking questions or whatever it may be, I want to get to the why, and usually the why is because they're not getting enough leads. Right? They're not, I would beg to say it's not because someone in California does not know about Terry Jones, a franchisee in Florida, right? That would be the national. So again, asking the question of, well, what are you hoping that this national spend will do for you when the results usually end up being at that local level? So
It's so true. We just completed a marketing analysis, a local marketing analysis for franchisees, and it shouldn't have been, as long as I've been doing this, surprising how many of them, when asked what their local marketing spend was, they put their brand fund contribution.
right.
Like the exact dollar that they're putting in for their brand fund contribution. And I think you also made a really good point too. I think leveraging really strong vendor partners that have a presence, franchisee facing, and we also partner with Consumer Fusion. They're a great example of talking to your franchisees and being a part of your meetings and your conferences, and that jump on the phone mentality and helping troubleshoot, because that is something that we've also had good success with. But yeah, I wish it wasn't true, but they do not understand the distinction between what that NAF is and then local marketing spend.
And that's why I think it's important too that you've got suppliers, let's say like Scorpion, right? They're franchisee and franchisor facing. So it's very easy for them to triage comms between and be on the same communication level. So it's not, one way or the other. We're all speaking the same language.
Yep.
Just trying to get the franchisees too.
Absolutely. And that's sort of like educational webinars, both at, franchisor to franchisee, and then also bringing in those partners to be even just talking about marketing in general, right? Like, what is even marketing? What should you be doing? Like, all of those things are really important because at the end of the day, they don't know what they don't know. And so when you just speak in the assumptions that they have, that's what kind of puts you in that spot. So for our first hot take of being local is the new national, I would love for anyone to see if you're really feeling excited. Do you agree or disagree with this approach? And Red's been super active, so I hope to see you interact.
Hopefully Shane will just be to a Heights yacht, because I would love Julie to have to explain a Heights yacht NAF spend.
It's all gone, but guys, look.
Look how great Shane looks on this.
Look.
I love it. Red is the new global. Amazing. Well, so similar lens, I think, as we're thinking of local as the new national, another thing that is totally a topic that gets brought up often is that franchisees should allocate majority of budget to digital. Now, I'd love for Maddie to think through, especially as a franchisee, how do you feel about this discussion? Because we know we hear it often.
Oh my God, do not get me started. I'm going to try not to swear, but we all know I live in Philly. So everyone knows I have to lead with data, because oftentimes I'm dealing with fixing brands or franchisees that are the tough ones, right? I'm like the tough mom. And so I have to tell them how it is. And I can't do that if I'm shooting from the hip. The reality is that previous to COVID, we were probably 70-30, with 30% of their marketing spend and efforts being in digital, maybe 40. COVID came, wiped the slate. In 2022 to 2023, it was like 99% digital because, shocker, we couldn't go local because 6 feet apart. It was working. And then it all started to change in 2024. And the problem is not only did we not go back to how it was, even if we had flipped, said 70% digital, 30% local, we're still at the 90% and then the 10% local. And the problem is that the less local you do, the more it costs you in digital invested dollars, and vice versa. There is no world, and the amount of times I have to say this to franchise brands, there is no world where being a part of a franchise brand nets you free leads. That's the goal, but you can certainly not rely on that. And one of my examples is my friend is a McDonald's franchisee, and she has to spend marketing dollars every month. If McDonald's has to spend in marketing dollars, why do we think that we don't have to? So yes, the majority of your actual cash spend needs to be in digital, because that is where people are searching. That's where they're finding. That's how we're shopping. That said, you still have to combat a piece of that to either get your costs down or grow beyond your revenue goals based on the formulas of cost per lead and conversion rates, and do the grassroots efforts. Usually what I do, and I have a marketing revenue calculator, I've sent it out a million times. I'm happy to do it. Just ping me on LinkedIn after. That basically takes your cost per lead, your conversion rate, your average ticket size, and says, okay, if you sit on your butt and do nothing, this is what you would have to spend. Now we can get that down if you do local efforts, or you can say, nope, I'm good with that. but we can't be accountable if you don't spend and don't do the local. And then I would say also, as you know, we've been franchisees for about 15 years now. We've earned the right to pull back on both because now our reputation, our reviews, and our brand awareness are kicking up the extra where we no longer have to invest. And the last thing I'll say to that, because I talk a lot, is that even as legacy franchisees, my husband and I have had to go back and invest more and do the local marketing pieces because COVID truly did a number on this economy. And so what was once a great hands-off legacy, we've now had to go back and get our feet wet again and start competing. Because the reality is that digital costs are at an all-time high. There are the monopolies that are capitalizing on that. And the only in between is us who has to relay that to the franchisees. And we have to be honest when we do that. Okay, shutting up now.
Julie, I think you have an interesting perspective as well, just in terms of how to educate your network on not necessarily the healthy balance, because I think to Maddie's point, following the data, but how do you make sure that there is they understand what that mix is in general and what they should be doing as part of that entire strategy?
Yeah, so Maddie nailed it. I mean, I agree with everything that she said with, I think it's a pretty healthy mixture. I would say our franchisees, I would 70-30 still, even though we're pushing them to be a little more 60-40, just in that grassroots avenue, but it's education. And one thing that we did at Heights that I feel really strongly about is we set up marketing managers who are a counterpart to the FBCs. They are doing the same thing that an FBC, and they work very closely with FBCs because you can't talk about marketing without talking about every other thing on your P&L. It all like weaves in together. But they're the ones that are educating, Gabriella, to answer your question about what does that mean? Where am I investing that money? We're also relying really strongly on our partners like Scorpion and Consumer Fusion to help make those kind of educational, Gabriella, you were talking about earlier, they're very franchisee facing, but also in an education piece of not all, I think some of our digital, we've moved towards localizing our digital. So some of that spend is going towards, the local listings and generating reviews and getting that customer experience, those reviews in, but also, looking at if you have an influencer activation that's $500 that could generate more ROI for you than that $500 being in a paid search campaign, because we know CPCs are higher. We know that. It doesn't necessarily mean the campaign's broken. It just means competition is stronger. It just means you need that layered approach. And so our marketing managers are amazing. They do consistent check-ins with the franchisees. They're doing budget optimization calls. But this is always the main point of those conversations. It's just like Maddie said, we have legacy franchisees who were able to pull off the gas on some of that local, and now they're right back in it. They're right back in. Even, I say 4 or 5 years past COVID, that is still the number one thing where we've seen a consistent rise with franchisees is localizing that digital just a little bit. Obviously, those campaigns for search and display are going to be really important, but focusing some of those funds on things that are more localized is really huge. And it, it just goes back to that first hot take we were talking about on local.
Yeah. And I think, as we kind of just explained, I saw some messages come through, thinking about how digital is obviously can be local as well. But when we're talking kind of about the mixture, it's the digital versus anything offline, right? So that's kind of how we're envisioning where should your majority of your budget go? And those are kind of the different tactics, because when you look at, your FDDs, you just say local marketing efforts. Some might have a specific digital spend, but if you're looking at it kind of more broadly, anything can go in that bucket, right? The partnerships with the gym can go in that bucket, sponsoring a little league company can go in that bucket. I know this because I've just been reading my FTD, so I'm like very much into the know, but I think that it is important to recognize how much goes into local marketing. And I think sometimes, putting on the different hat here, digital is just one sliver of that, right? And I think that you have to understand what's actually driving the best investment for you overall, because in different markets, that could be very different to an individual franchisee.
Sure.
And I would
Yeah.
say too, like on average, it takes a customer who engages with your brand for the first time 12 to 15 impressions. Not every impression counts the same. If they go to your website based on a QR code from a business card, that's probably equal to 7 or 8. If they see your t-shirt in a gym, it might be equal to 1. So, there's a franchise marketing map that I've created, but very easy for any marketing manager to kind of show, here's where if you're talking about one customer, here's everywhere they could see you. Now you're not investing money or time into everywhere. So why don't we select a few? Now let's put what we think we could get an impression from, and remind you, wherever you're adding has to add up to 12 to 15, right? So if you're all in digital, and let's say PPC, you're hoping that someone is going to Google you 12 to 15 times or your keywords. If you're all in Meta, well, you're hoping that, people eventually see you enough to convert. And like I always say, when was the last time you went on Facebook, said, can't wait to get a chiropractor, right? So you have to also hold those channels accountable for what they're good at. Meta is great for brand awareness, not for high intent. PPC, high intent, direct mailer. So all of that to say, franchisees are always looking for, this is where I get my leads, and this doesn't work. Well, it's so much of a wheel now that more cogs you pull out, the worse the wheel and the slower the wheel is going to go. So oftentimes having to remind themselves that if you remove all of the brand awareness, then in turn your cost per lead and your volume is going to be slower on the other pieces.
Totally. Absolutely. Now, so as we kind of move on, before we move on to the next one, just knowing how we've all described it of following the data and recognizing there's education to this mix. How do you feel about agreeing or disagreeing with this hot take of franchisees allocating majority of their budget to digital?
And I'll say too, I tell franchisees this all the time. I would rather you invest nothing and then you are out working your business every day. I would lean on local before I leaned on fully digital all day, every day. I have yet to see that happen in the last 5 years, though. So.
My dream. That's my
It
dream.
is a dream. It is a dream.
It's a good dream.
A fever dream.
Yes, it's a fever, yes. I have a lot of agrees.
Yeah, interesting. I think the one is the depends, right? Because I think it's about data and knowing the business type and understanding kind of what's actually driving that. And I also think maturity level will account for that. Are you a newer location, or do you have something that's been there for a long time? And also maybe how long has the brand itself been around? Like, I think there's a lot of factors in here, but I do think just talking about it more of that, there's not a one size fits all approach. I think is the healthy way to start that discussion, because at the end of the day, all of us are in different markets, different industries, different consumers that we're trying to attract, but data will kind of help us lead to that answer.
And I think, I commented that we put marketing managers in place, and I know that that's not they're not able to do that. And I know that I've said this before, but I think that's where also leaning on I look at our vendor partners as an extension of my marketing team. And I have parted ways with a vendor because they could not do what Maddie was just talking about. Like, give the data, what is it doing in an educational way? Because Gabriella, what you were just saying, like every market is different, every industry is different. And so if I encourage you, if you have a smaller team, to make sure that you are partnering with vendors who are going to do that with you, with your franchisees, because there's not a day that we don't talk about this in some capacity with a franchisee, or even on our team meetings. I had one today, just talking about brand fund versus local marketing and how we get that message out. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this stems really nicely into something that Maddie and I recently were at the Google event, and this kind of got brought up in a very big setting, but in the fact of, rising costs in digital does not mean your marketing isn't working. And so how do we make sure that, one, how do you feel about this? But two, how do we make sure we're educating people to understand what this actually means, despite not being an actual marketer? So I don't know if Julie or Maddie who wants to take this first, but I do know that this is quite frankly, one of the hottest topics that we keep hearing about, especially from the behemoths. But how can we educate that process, and knowing that it's not necessarily about switching vendors all the time to get that accomplishment, but that things have actually just changed in the marketplace.
Well, I think it's important on, especially on like webinars like this, that we need to talk to one another, and that's something I, very much try to push. And there's been times I called Julie and I'm like, hey, one of the brands I sit on the board with is this is what we're seeing in a conversion rate. Is this what you see? And so a lot of that leaning on the franchise community and also with our vendors helps that, and that helps you understand, is it just me? Is it just my vendor? But the reality is that you gotta, regardless of if you truly think it's your vendor or not, your brand benchmarks are going to be your brand benchmarks. And we all know it's very difficult and time consuming to switch, which means that you need to go in and figure out, even if this is what the data is saying, what does that mean for us? And the time that you got to sit down operationally and think at the executive level, well, when this number no longer makes a business, meaning based on our benchmarks, we have to invest more to make less. That's when it doesn't make sense. So, encouraging you, like Julie said, to combine those marketing metrics in terms of your cost per lead, your conversion rate, your ticket size, what is your average marketing spend? How many leads is that going to get you, and et cetera, et cetera. So again, we know that Google controls the monopoly. I went at them pretty hard, and Gab's like, you're going to get sniped out by Google real quick. And I was like, they basically said, hey, if you don't want to play ball with us, you don't have to. And I was like, that was like me telling my kids so they can run away. Like, I'll pack your suitcase. Enjoy that. We know it's going to come back. So I think it's less about focusing on the rising costs and more about being transparent with people. Hey, franchisees want to spend the least amount as possible. We are the worst. We literally, truly are the worst. When I tell franchisees that on average, a company should be prepared to spend 5 to 8% of their revenue on marketing, they're like, when in reality, right now, it's about 12 to 15%.
Yep.
And so part of this is also understanding that, like, hey, is anything the same cost as it was in 2023 right now? Probably not. So it's less about fighting the rising costs and more about optimizing everything we can around it, because that in fact is an uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get so crazy. I get the same reaction when I give that percentage. Yeah, I did. I again don't disagree with any of that, because I said before, we know that the costs are rising. I definitely, it's going to keep going back to that education piece, because it doesn't mean that it's broken. But to Maddie's point, like, you have to adapt and refine your funnel, and what that looks like from a digital perspective. Is that more value-led content? Is that stronger retargeting? Is that, just to get the waste? Because, like, to me, conversion metrics, it's not just the CTR. Like, a campaign with a lower click-through rate but higher converting, that can still be the winner. That, and I think it's like you said, it's just going back and it's adapting and optimizing, but having the flexibility to be able to do that. And I think that's one thing that this brand evolution has really taught me. And one of the things that I've tried to remember is, just because we've done something one way in this brand for 20 years doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. And thankfully, I work with an executive leadership team that is hugely on board with that, because it's not always the case. And it's starting to make sure that if you're launching new campaigns, that you do have those A/B testing in place, and you do have really, like, strong tracking mechanisms in there, because I would love to be able to sit here and say, this isn't gonna, in 2 years the costs will go down, right? They're gonna be so much lower. This is something as marketers we'll be dealing with forever, especially in the digital space, because there's some things my team will ask me about digital, and I'm like, I literally haven't done that since 2018, which is 30 eons ago in a digital marketing space. So I don't, it's just constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. So your spend has to, your optimization has to, your willingness to pivot has to. But yeah, it doesn't mean it's not working. But to Maddie's point, you still have the same benchmarks for your brand, but there can be creative ways to get to those numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
And
you
I
know,
think it's
there's so much too. I have a franchisee, and they're converting their leads at 12% when our brand benchmark was 48. Like, it doesn't matter how many leads I get you. You just
Right.
have to keep spending. You're not closing
Yeah.
them, Terry. It's not actually his name, but I find Terry as a funny name. So you know, it's those pieces too that yeah, costs are going to keep going if you want to hit a certain revenue when the bucket has a huge hole in the middle of it. So you know, we got to take those pieces into account as well.
I think that's a really good point to think through though, especially if you know, we're a membership based model, and you know, the old adage that it's my job to drive those appointments and those prospects in the door. It's a really good thing to pay attention to. And another hot take, marketing should be working with operations as closely as you work with your teams. Like you should be as close with the operations team as you are with within your marketing team, because a lot of times we'll get a franchisee that's very frustrated and they're like, you know, my prospects are down, that, you know, whatever the case is. It's just what Maddie said. Then we'll go in and we'll start like looking at their conversion rate. And, you know, same, I'm going with Terry now, you know, Terry calls us and he's like, I need more prospects. And we're like, our benchmark is 20%. Like you're converting at 7%. I don't want like, and so then it becomes a matter of working with operations. We're listening to their calls. You know, what are the lifestyle consultants at the desk? How do they need training? Like, is this a training? Because it's not. That's why working really closely with your operations is just paramount. It's not even a recommendation, it's paramount, because it always comes back to marketing, right? It's like, it's marketing's fault. Like we need more leads, we need more appointments, we need more prospects, when it's not always the case. So
And also they're more expensive.
Yeah.
Fine, I'll get you more, but can I have more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I have a brand that to meet their blue sky revenue goals, I said, definitively I need $12,000 a month from you guys. Their average spend is $1,700. And that, let me tell you, they're not doing the delta in grassroots to make up for that 10 extra. So this is where we're have to, I'm like, guys, I understand that we can't just keep telling you to spend more. However, everything is more expensive, so every ad dollar counts, which means we don't have money to play with to not close the leads.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the key message, right? Is making sure your marketing and your ops are completely intertwined in that process, because as we know, rising costs are happening naturally. That's what's going on. What could we be doing to just improve the closing rate and the conversion, right? And those are things that are typically training, right? Like training them to get better at closing a sale versus necessarily, to Julie's point, spending more money just to get more leads. Like there's probably a world in which, if we've done this analysis with almost all of our brands, there is a world in which you have definitely enough highly qualified leads that are not closing because of so many external reasons. But at the end of the day, all you needed to do was look at the actual consumer journey funnel in its entirety and realize that maybe the broken part is not marketing and the actual lead generation, but it's truly the sales and closing process. So my big recommendation there is finding ways to make sure that in this rising cost, economy that we're in when it comes to lead generation, take a look at your entire funnel and really understand, is there more internal training that could be done to make those existing leads close faster?
So yeah, we had a question that came in from Jake. What are the marketing channel recommendations for franchisees to be in if they are a business service category? We serve B2B and not B2C with a smaller pool of decision makers. I'll take this.
I was going to say,
heavy,
this one's for you.
heavy B2B. This is something that I fight with franchisees and leadership in general, just from a marketing standpoint, is because with commercial leads, especially in a service business, we cannot crank up marketing spend to control the amount of leads that come in. It is truly, you work with some vendors, typically it is outbound email. There's a bunch out there. There's some great ones in franchising, and you turn it on and it's a retainer and you get it or you don't. But if you're also, trying to offset some of those costs with residential, or B2C, excuse me, we focus on that because there is where you can crank the spend and you can say, I'm going to get more leads or less. In commercial, it truly is an on or an off. So to answer your question, Jake, oftentimes I would recommend one, you're putting a minimum budget into PPC, maybe a little bit LSA with commercial keywords. The volume is not there, so you won't spend a lot, but you certainly want to show up if someone's searching you. You got to go heavy in reviews. And then on top of that, obviously the SEO so that you're showing up for all those commercial categories. And then lastly, you probably are wanting to partner with some great, outbound commercial email companies. I have a list of them if you would like recommendations, but that's usually the best go-to. That's the most consistent and predictable in terms of costs.
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie, for answering that live.
I wish ChatGPT could be in my head to be like, how about you say 2 words instead of 7,000? Yet to learn how to shut up more, but I'm trying.
I feel like we'll be there one day.
One day we'll get there.
Yeah, like how we have the Meta glasses? I feel like
yeah, it's just gonna just say shut up. It's like the Oscars where they're like, oh, you have to wrap up your speech.
I'll put on some like closing music. Okay, you're done.
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of this one, how do we feel? Do we agree or do we disagree with this hot take here? Oh, I like chat Maddie.
Can you imagine? It'd be like, click here for tequila. Click here. Click here for franchisee support.
Awesome. I love the engagement, guys. So appreciate you guys, just listening and taking it in. And as we said, we're happy to answer questions live. So please feel free to use that functionality. So now I think to close out our last hot take before additional Q&A, it's really in line. And I think as we go into this next phase of data and just thinking about as everything we just talked about, right? The entire customer journey, what does that funnel look like? Now, the best part is how can we be better leveraging our customer data? And I think that this sometimes gets a very interesting rap when we think about first-party data, but the hot take is first-party data can actually change your marketing. And I think that, Julie, I'll let you take this one first. What is your hot take on this and why? Because we know that it can make some impacts, but we also know that there's a lot of franchisees are a little hesitant of what this even means or how to leverage it.
Yeah, so my hot take is if you're not utilizing first-party data, you're missing a lot of really good information, both from consumers who are new to you on your website and even those that like are members, for example. So it's shifted how we prioritize our campaigns. Like, for example, when we were going through this evolution, one of the things that we know is from an older Gen Z, younger millennial perspective, skin, I don't know, this is like going to be a huge, if you've ever been on Skin Talk, but the data that we got on, we know that, like I said, older Gen Z and younger millennial, but how important skincare is to not only new consumers in our brand, but those that are members, like the membership data that we've gotten. Any of the member trends like that we get insight onto, like for example, elevations and add-on interest. Normally in the summer, we run a very themed foot scrub. And this year, after looking at the first party data that we've got from our members, we didn't do that. We now have a summer wellness passport lifting up these elevations, cold stones and CBD therapy. It also gives you churn risk. And even emotional connection. So we use it to really tailor who's getting what campaigns, how we're speaking to certain subsets of both leads and our members. It makes your personalization, both with email and SMS, I'll say so much more meaningful. I don't think this is going to be a huge shock, but when you are speaking to someone based on an interest you know that they already have and it has become a more personalized experience, you get way better engagement. And so it's something that I was like everyone else, I was very hesitant in the beginning before, we started with first party data. And it has been one of the most pleasant surprises that has given us the ability to kind of get some insights into, like I said, new people on the website, but then also we've just gotten a lot of data around our membership base, and just beyond surveys and regular stuff like that. So that's my hot take on first party data.
Love it. And Maddie, I'd love your perspective, especially because I know that there was a lot of discussion when we were at Google about customer matching in particular. So, what were some of the maybe concerns you can also share with the group that was being discussed versus to Julie's, her point of view in terms of making sure that it's actually a positive thing?
Yeah. And, it's important to customer match because remember, customers are the laziest people. And so when we go to find something, and if the phone number isn't directly in front of us, we're going to Google it and they're probably going to click your ad. So every time that they decide they are a customer and they want to get in touch with you, customer service or rescheduling, and they're clicking an ad, that's wasted ad spend. So we want to prevent that. Customer matching first party data will allow your ad to not show to those specific people. I work with a chiropractic brand and we found out that 40% of our clicks were coming from current customers because it's a membership model. And so there's a lot of reschedules. And, we finally got down to brass tacks at Google and they said there's no way around it because of HIPAA. However, we did get a suggestion that we tell our franchisees to really push a virtual business card every time saying, save this in your phone. This is the number you need to call for rescheduling. Is it going to be a silver bullet? No, but it is certainly something that we can put into operations to prevent that, knowing that there is nothing that we can do to customer match with first party data revolving HIPAA.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that's important to know, right? Of understanding what is first party data and what it means to actually impact your business, because to Maddie's point, there are certain industries that have some limitations from a legal perspective, and you have to understand what that looks like. And I know that there's a ton of ways to potentially still do some workarounds and to find that in terms of the right partner that could provide you some of that recommendations and that advisement. But no matter what, to Julie's point, like first party data is so important into leveraging, optimizing. Like this is truly the best way to optimize your strategies, right? As we talked about, everything's changing, things are constantly evolving. First party data is definitely probably the hottest topic in the past year or so, because now that there is so much data out there, what are we actually doing to leverage it within our systems, right? Like what can we be doing to make sure that we're actually leveraging who's potentially engaging with us, and how can we maybe actually go into getting more of those types of people, right? Where are they coming from? And all of those things are really important in terms of making a stronger strategy. And then that's the value, right? If you think about the brand itself, like that's the value of having a franchise is we do have data around our customers, our consumers. Where are they? What are they doing? And those are the things that we can ideally help influence at that location level. So regarding a first party data, anything else, Julie or Maddie, you want to add before we actually, just do an agree or disagree, and then we could start going to some of the Q&A.
I would just say, please, for the love of all things franchising, make sure that you have the correct language on your website or your texting so that you have full opt-in, because the last thing you want to do is a disgruntled, super rich grandma who's like, I'm going to do a lawsuit because I can. And then for every non-approved, I think it's like text you send, it would be a $500 up to a $500 to $1,500 fine per text, which is why, is someone going to sue you? Probably not. But we always know that there's that one grandma that's like, my son's a lawyer, and it's on like Donkey Kong. So please make sure you have the approved opt-in language on your website.
No, totally. That's a good call out, because the blessing and a curse of first party data, which is why I think a lot of people are hesitant, is understanding what it means to protect the brand and protect the privacy of the data of your customers. So good call out, Maddie, and making sure that you have all the right language. There's a bunch of lawyers out there in franchising world that would help you write that. I just want to say, as marketing people, that should not be the marketer's job. Just an FYI, that should be someone who is actually on your team that's writing some specific privacy policies for the brand itself. So in terms of one of our next questions that we got, Maddie, I think you were going to take this one. We have a small, let's just say small or not small, but restaurant businesses, like a coffee shop, who want to better understand the importance of some organic social media versus the paid social side.
I live for this question. Okay, I have a friend who works very high up in Meta, and I finally called her and I said, girl, you got to help me here because everybody is always, franchisees are so obsessed with their organic social, the content that's going out. And she said, here's the reality. Facebook specific, for every post a business page posts, 2.7% of their followers see that, which means if you have 500 likes on your page, roughly 10 to 15 people are seeing it, probably people that are friends and family. That is not going to put cash money in the cash register. Now, it does not show it to anybody else that's not already following you. That's the difference with Instagram. It can show it. It usually won't unless your page has over 5,000 followers and it puts it on a For You page. So in reality, unless a franchisee has a huge Facebook or Instagram following, usually the organic social is only to keep the lights on for the algorithm of Facebook and Meta Facebook and Google. It all works together in that local SEO package. I always say that it's your digital storefront aside from your website. If someone lands on your Facebook, they don't want to see that the last post was from June 2023, right? But in reality, we shouldn't be focusing a ton of time or resources on organic content because not enough people are seeing it to produce an ROI. The way that we get more followers, grassroots efforts, or we're running ads to get more followers and page likes. Usually, if we're going to run an ad on Meta, it's going to have a different call to action. Visit the website, et cetera, et cetera. So that said, all roads lead to paid. Not enough people are going to see that organic, even though that franchisee loves looking, what I say, I know you love looking in the mirror and you want it to look nice every single time, but who else is looking at that? Probably me. Okay, I love that question. Makes me feel smart when I have data.
I agree. I have nothing else. I have nothing to add because having any sort of social strategy without a budget behind it is not a social strategy. So I agree with that.
Awesome. Great. Now,
Great. Great.
So I know we talked about first party data. I think we already got the crowd to agree or disagree, which is awesome. Or maybe not. I'm just looking back. So I guess, yeah. How do you all feel about first party data making impact? And then from there, if there's any other Q&As, questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we will get to them because we have about just 10 minutes left. Awesome. Great.
I'd say too, Julie, I don't know. I think first party data, like it's hard because we have access to a lot of our franchisees' data, but not all of it. Sometimes they keep them in a spreadsheet. So it can be very intimidating. I typically rely and lean on our ads partner to make sure that they're doing it. Because if we ask the franchisee to do it, if we try to do it, it becomes a huge lift. And it's also a way that they can come at us if we do it wrong, right? Those are their babies, those are their customers.
Yeah.
So
we don't even ask them to because it's so daunting for us as
Correct.
marketing professionals. So yeah.
Correct.
And I think that's a good call out in terms of relying on your advertising partners. This is something, for example, like in Google's ecosystem, especially, you could just turn it on automatically and it's done, right? Like you don't even have to send them something. Like there's an upload functionality if you want to, but if you actually turn on the basic customer matching, that's happening in the background. A franchisee has to take no action whatsoever. And those are the things that one, your strategic partner should be informing you about, but also making sure that those types of value adds are actually enabled for your systems. So ask those questions to your partners because it should automatically be turned on. And if it's not, ask them to.
Yep.
Now, we have, like I said, we have about 10 minutes left.
There is a question that says thoughts and suggestions around positioning yourself as an expert in your local market and how that works together with the national franchise brand. I would say it's, you'll take this, Julie. I'm going to try and keep it 2 cents. My 2 cents is that the national is not local and that we're providing the systems for the franchisee to deploy locally. yes, you always want to position yourself as an expert, but what does that look like? Usually you'll give them, instead of saying, go be the mayor, go be the expert of your town, give them a task list. Like, I got 5 brands and 3 kids. I'm not going to a BNI meeting on a Thursday night. I want to drink wine. However, if you tell me that on average, every BNI meeting you go to, you net $2,000 in referrals, I'm taking a sippy cup. So those are the metrics you want to look at. What should we be doing locally to be an expert, and what do we get out of them? How many leads do we normally get? And you can track all of that, but definitely put metrics behind local. But Julie, go ahead.
I also think that positioning yourself as an expert comes from trust and credibility, and that's just something that you're not going to be able to do unless you are out in your community. Like, I tell our franchisees all the time, and this is not a Heights Wellness Retreat thing. This is, back to training franchisees in the early days of outdoor pest control. It be the mayor. Like, it's shaking hands and kissing babies. That, if you ask me what the silver bullet is, that's what it is. Because I think I'm a mom. I have 2 boys who play on a billion different sports teams. They're at 2 different schools. The businesses that I see out interacting and sponsoring the Little League teams, and, at the wellness fair and at the, community farmers market, I may not in the very beginning see you as an expert, but the more that I see you invested in the community, and the more that I see you becoming a part of the community, that is where that trust and credibility comes in. And then I start to notice, it's not a sprint, it's very much a marathon, when you're working in grassroots marketing. But I think that's where you start to build you are the local expert. Because I'm going to assume, I think it was Denise that sent the chat's going crazy, so I don't remember who it was that asked that. I'm going to assume that you are the expert, and I don't need to, I'm just going to think about you as I saw you at a Heights Wellness Retreat, community fair. And so my instinct is you are a trusted member of this community. Therefore, you must be the expert in massage and skincare and wellness. So all that to say, though, when you're out there doing that much grassroots marketing, when you're out there in your community, you better make sure that guest experience matches exactly what you are positioning out in the community. All of that has to tie back together, because that is going to lead to good reviews. That is going to lead to referrals. That is where you get that full circle credibility, trust. You're the expert, because not only did they see you there, but they have the reviews that back that up from people who've come into your location or experienced your service. If you don't have a brick and mortar, it all ties together. So just to close the loop on that, yes, push that grassroots. Yes, franchisees need to be out in the community, but you better make damn sure that guest experience matches it, so that you're getting those reviews, because that's the next place that consumers are going to go to look for you.
Totally.
Fun fact, one time my neighbor was like, oh, Maddie, Jesse, we actually need some house cleaning. Can we have Maid Pro's card? And my husband's like, no, because I don't really think we're doing the best job right now. And I don't want no.
Like,
it's true. It's true.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, because
Yeah.
it's so true. You don't want to put your name behind something that's not, that's anything in life. So, I mean, that's cutthroat, but I dig it.
I mean, it's been like 15 years with maid service at this point. We're like, oh God. We'll get back to it. Wait, but Gab, I can answer that question if you want to ask it.
So we just got a question. To track conversion of social media views to dollars in the pockets, is there any way to do that?
So there's a couple ways. One, you should always have a metapixel on your website so that they can track.
Yes.
After that, there's a couple ways that you can go about this, because it is truly what I'll call the halo effect. If you have the pixel, meaning that they can record where this originated from, then you could say how many, so views are listed as impressions. How many impressions did this post or this ad get? And how many direct leads did I get from it? Of the conversion rate on average, how much revenue came from it. So then you can say the revenue to the impressions, this is how many impressions I need to make X in revenue. If you don't have the pixel, then you could look at, based on impressions, when you ran the ad, where you ran it, how was the website traffic, and let's say form fills or calls. Did it pick up organically? How did your PPC do? So it's kind of an indirect. So all that to say is you can take a look at the number of views, and depending on if you have a pixel or not, use that as an indirect influence on what your other numbers are telling you.
Awesome.
And if you're not getting enough impressions, it means that there's not enough people seeing it, i.e. you probably need more budget or more followers.
Great.
You're gonna say it like that. Right.
Great.
Yeah.
My mom has this saying where she says grape, like the
Grape.
yeah. So I think our whole family is just rephrased how we say great. We have about 5 minutes left, but I don't see any questions in the queue. So if there's no other questions, we can give you 5 minutes of your time back. So I'll give you quick time to type. But if not, awesome. Great.
Thanks,
Well,
Dan.
Great.
I hope you guys all have a great rest of your week. And thank you for joining us for this hour. We hope you got some good nuggets. You can reach out to any of us via LinkedIn. I know Maddie's very willing to always share her information as well. So just let us know. The recording will go out to you all. And if anyone missed it on your team, feel free to actually share it with them as well. So thank you guys and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Ladies, you guys were
Bye.
awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks all. Bye, guys.